Story 1. Part 1. Just a bed. One night. Hello, everyone. Before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It helps these stories find the people who need them most. Now, let the night take over. I didn't plan to stop there. I was supposed to make it another 2 hours, maybe 3, before calling it a night. But plans don't mean much when you've been driving since sunrise. Your eyes burn every time you blink, and the road ahead looks exactly like the road behind you. I'd left Amarillo early that morning, headed west, trying not to think too hard about why I didn't want to be home yet. The radio had long since faded into static, and my phone sat face down in the cup holder, buzzing every now and then with notifications I refused to check. By the time the neon sign appeared on the side of the highway, my hands were trembling slightly on the steering wheel. Vacancy. The letters flickered unevenly, like they couldn't decide whether to stay lit. The motel itself sat back from the road, half hidden behind a row of scrubby trees and a sagging chain-link fence. One long, single-story building, peeling beige paint. A parking lot of cracked asphalt and weeds. There was nothing inviting about it, but it was there. I pulled off the highway and rolled into the lot, gravel crunching beneath my tires. Only one other car was parked near the far end, an old dark sedan with its windows fogged from the inside. I sat in my car for a moment, engine ticking softly as it cooled, telling myself I just needed a bed. One night. That was it. The office was small and dim, lit by a buzzing fluorescent panel that made everything look sickly. The air smelled like dust, old carpet, and something faintly chemical. Behind the counter sat a woman in her late 50s or early 60s, hair pulled back tight, reading glasses perched low on her nose. She looked up when I stepped inside. "One night?" she asked, voice flat, like she'd already moved on to the next thought. "Yeah," I said, "just need a room." She tapped a few keys on an ancient computer, the screen casting a dull blue glow across her face. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the lights and the distant hiss of traffic from the highway. "We're mostly empty," she said. "Any preference?" I shook my head. "Doesn't matter. Whatever's easiest." She paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then she glanced up at me, really looked at me for the first time. "Room 8 is closest," she said. "Right by the end." "That's fine." Another hesitation. Subtle, but noticeable. "There's no curtains in 8, she added, almost casually. "Some folks don't like that." I frowned. "No curtains?" She shrugged. "Old place. Never got around to fixing it." I glanced toward the window behind her, which looked out onto the dark parking lot. "That's okay," I said. "I'll be asleep anyway." For a second, I thought she might argue. Instead, she reached under the counter and slid a metal key toward me, attached to a thin plastic tag with a faded white number. 8. As I took it, her fingers brushed mine, cold, dry. "Checkout's at 11, she said. "Office opens at 6. I nodded, thanked her, and turned to leave. As my hand touched the door, I heard her speak again, quieter this time. "If you change your mind," she said, 5 and 7 are still open." I looked back at her. "Change my mind about what?" She was already looking down at her screen again. "Nothing," she said. "Have a good night." Outside, the air felt heavier, thicker somehow. The neon sign buzzed overhead, bathing the walkway in an uneven orange glow. I followed the row of rooms down toward the far end, my footsteps echoing softly against the concrete. Room 8 was the last door. The window beside it was completely bare. No curtains, no blinds, no rod marks, nothing. Just a large rectangle of dark glass reflecting the neon light and my own tired face back at me. For a split second, I thought I saw movement behind the glass, a shape shifting deeper in the room. But when I stopped and focused, there was nothing, just darkness. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was exactly what you'd expect from a roadside motel. Low ceiling, two mismatched lamps, a bed with a stiff-looking mattress and a faded spread. The carpet was worn thin, and the air smelled faintly of cleaner trying to mask something older. I dropped my bag onto the chair and locked the door behind me. Then I looked at the window again. Up close, it felt wrong. The glass was spotless. No streaks, no smudges, no dust. And where a curtain rod should have been, there were no holes, no brackets, no marks at all. Like nothing had ever been installed there. I stood there longer than I meant to, staring at my reflection. My face looked pale under the fluorescent light, eyes ringed with dark shadows. When a car passed on the highway, its headlights slid briefly across the glass, warping my reflection into something stretched and unfamiliar. I turned away, suddenly uncomfortable. I told myself I was overtired. That was all. Too many hours on the road, not enough sleep, too much time alone with my thoughts. I lay down on the bed, shoes still on, and stared up at the ceiling. Just one night, I thought. Then I'll be gone. As I reached over to turn off the lamp, the neon outside flickered again, and for just a heartbeat, the window reflected something that wasn't me. I sat up fast. The reflection was gone. The room was silent. And somewhere deep in my chest, a quiet, unreasonable certainty settled in. The feeling that room 8 wasn't missing curtains because someone forgot to put them up. It was missing them because nothing inside this room was ever meant to be hidden. Part 2. The window isn't looking out. I didn't turn the lights off right away. I lay there listening to the motel settle around me, the faint hum of electricity in the walls, a distant car passing on the highway, the occasional metallic click as the neon sign outside struggled to stay alive. Every time it flickered, the room seemed to breathe. Eventually, exhaustion won. I reached over and switched off the lamp. The room fell into darkness, lit only by the orange glow bleeding in through the window. I rolled onto my side, facing it. From the bed, I could clearly see the parking lot reflected in the glass. Cracked asphalt, my car sitting alone under a buzzing light, the office building at the far end. It was comforting in a strange way, proof that the world outside still existed. My eyes burned. I let them close, just for a second. When I opened them again, the parking lot was gone. At first, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. I lay there, frozen, waiting for the image to snap back into place. Instead of asphalt and cars, the window now showed a narrow strip of road bordered by dark trees. Tall, thin trunks crowded together, their branches reaching overhead and blotting out the sky. No street lights, No buildings. Just a long, empty stretch disappearing into blackness. I sat up so fast my head spun. The image didn't change. My heart started to race. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them again. The parking lot was back. Neon light. My car. The office. I exhaled shakily and pressed a hand to my chest, feeling my heartbeat hammering beneath my ribs. Get it together, I muttered aloud. It had been a micro-sleep. That's what it was. The kind that sneaks up on you after too many hours behind the wheel. Your brain fills in nonsense for a split second before reality snaps back. That explanation should have been enough. It wasn't. I stayed sitting up, staring at the window, afraid to blink. Minutes passed. My eyes watered, vision blurring at the edges. Finally, I risked it. A slow blink this time, deliberate. When my eyes opened, the view had shifted again. This time, it wasn't the road. It was a hallway. Long, narrow, carpeted in the same dull pattern as my room. Identical doors lining both sides, each with a small metal number plate. The lights overhead flickered weakly, casting uneven shadows along the walls. I could see clearly now. This wasn't outside at all. It was inside the motel. A chill ran through me, sharp and immediate. I threw the blankets aside and stood up, my bare feet sinking into the worn carpet. No, I whispered. I stepped closer to the window. The hallway remained perfectly still, stretching farther than the building possibly could. The perspective was wrong. Too deep, too long. Then, at the far end of the hall, something moved. A shape shifted near one of the doors. Not stepping out, just adjusting, like someone standing very still had slightly changed their weight. I staggered back, bumping into the bed. The moment I broke eye contact, the window snapped back to normal. Parking lot. Neon. Silence. My hands were shaking now. I turned every light in the room back on and paced from wall to wall, trying to force logic back into the situation. Hallucinations, I told myself. Extreme fatigue. Stress. My mind playing tricks on me in an unfamiliar place. I needed proof. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and opened the camera app. Propped it up on the dresser, angled directly at the window so it could see everything. Then I stood beside it and took a slow breath. Okay, I said quietly. Okay. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, the window showed the hallway again. But on my phone screen, still recording, the parking lot hadn't changed at all. I stared back and forth between the glass and the phone, my stomach twisting. The two realities didn't match. As I stood there, trying to understand how that was even possible, I noticed something else. In the reflection of the hallway, faint but unmistakable, there was a shape behind me. Not close, not moving, just standing there. I spun around, heart leaping into my throat. The room was empty. When I turned back to the window, the hallway was gone. The parking lot stared back at me, indifferent and silent. I ended the recording and watched it back, hands trembling. The footage showed nothing unusual. No hallway, no shadow. Just me, standing alone in a cheap motel room, staring at a window like I'd lost my mind. I lowered the phone slowly. That's when I saw it. A thin, pale line on the glass, right at eye level. At first, I thought it was a scratch. But when I leaned closer, my breath caught. It curved. Two short lines intersected it at the top. Someone had traced the number 8 into the window, from the inside. My reflection stared back at me through the mark, eyes wide and terrified. And for the first time since I'd checked in, the thought hit me with terrifying clarity. Whatever was happening here didn't want to scare me away. It wanted me to keep looking. Part 3. Every time I blinked, it changed. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the edge of the bed with the lights on, phone clutched in my hand, staring at the window like it might move on its own. Every instinct told me to grab my bag and leave, but the highway outside was dark, and my body felt heavy, sluggish, like it didn't quite belong to me anymore. I needed to understand what was happening, not because I wanted to, because I couldn't stop myself. I moved the phone back onto the dresser, this time switching to video and turning on the front-facing camera. I wanted my face in the frame, proof that I wasn't imagining things, proof that something was wrong. The red recording dot appeared. I stood perfectly still and looked at the window. Parking lot, same as before. The neon sign flickered once, buzzing softly. I took a slow breath. Then I blinked. The hallway replaced the parking lot instantly. Sharper this time, clearer. The carpet pattern was unmistakable. The same stains. The same faint discoloration near the baseboards. I could even read the numbers on the doors now. Room 6, Room 7, and at the far end, Room 8. My knees nearly buckled. The door at the end of the hallway, my door, was slightly open, light spilling out into the corridor. The light from my room. I hadn't opened it. My breath came fast and shallow. I raised my phone slightly, keeping the camera rolling, then blinked again. Parking lot. I stopped the recording and immediately played it back. On screen, nothing changed. No hallway, no door, no impossible depth. Just me blinking in a silent room. I scrubbed a hand down my face and laughed once, sharp and humorless. "This is insane," I whispered. But my voice sounded wrong in the room, too loud, like it didn't belong. I tried again. Blink, hallway, blink, parking lot, again and again. Each time the hallway returned, it felt closer, not physically, but intentionally, like it was responding to me noticing it, testing me. On the fourth time, I caught something new. In the hallway view, one of the doors wasn't closed. Room 7. The door was ajar just enough to reveal darkness inside. Not shadow. Darkness. Thick, swallowing light at the edges. I didn't blink that time. I stared until my eyes burned, tears forming at the corners. The hallway stayed. The door stayed open. And then, very slowly, something inside room 7 shifted. I didn't see a face, or a body, just a change in the darkness, like something tall had leaned forward to look out. I blinked hard. The parking lot snapped back into place, and I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the chair. My phone buzzed in my hand. The recording had stopped on its own. I looked down at the screen, my pulse roaring in my ears. The last frame showed me staring wide-eyed at the window. But behind me, there was a blur, not a reflection, not a trick of light. A vertical smear, darker than the shadows in the room, standing where the bathroom doorway was. I dropped the phone. It clattered against the carpet, screen still glowing. When I looked up, The room was empty again. I backed toward the door and checked the lock. Still secure. The deadbolt hadn't moved. I slid the chair underneath the handle anyway, my hands shaking so badly I could barely position it. Then I noticed the sound, a faint tapping, not on the door, on the window. Tap, 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 slow, deliberate. I froze, every muscle locked. The tapping wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the glass itself, from the other side of whatever the window was showing now. I forced myself to look. The hallway had returned, and this time the tapping had a source. A hand pressed flat against the glass from the hallway side. Pale, long-fingered, the skin stretched too tight over the knuckles. The fingers flexed once, leaving faint streaks where they touched. I couldn't breathe. The hand slid down the glass slowly, deliberately, until the fingertips lined up exactly with where my own hand rested on the other side. Then a message appeared, traced in the fog of my breath and the cold of the glass. Don't close your eyes. The lights flickered violently. I screamed and stumbled back, slamming into the wall. When the light steadied, the window showed the parking lot again. Empty, normal, but the glass was no longer clean. 5 long streaks marked where the fingers had been, and beneath them, carved deep enough to feel with my nail, was a word I hadn't seen before. Stay. That was when I understood. This wasn't a window, it was a boundary, and every time I blinked, I was letting something on the other side get closer. Part 4. The window was a door. I stopped blinking. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean I forced my eyes open and kept them that way, staring at the window until they burned and watered, until my vision pulsed at the edges and my head throbbed. Every instinct screamed that closing my eyes, even for a fraction of a second, would be a mistake I couldn't undo. The word stay was still carved into the glass. Not fogged, not smudged, carved. I touched it with the tip of my finger. The groove was shallow but real, like someone had pressed something sharp against the surface and dragged it slowly, deliberately. Behind me, the room felt wrong, too quiet. I turned in place, scanning every corner. Bathroom door open, closet empty. Nothing under the bed but dust and a forgotten sock from some previous guest. When I looked back at the window, the parking lot was still there. But now, it felt thin, like a painted backdrop stretched over something else. I stepped closer and noticed something I hadn't before. Along the edge of the window frame, where it met the wall, there was a seam, perfectly straight, too clean to be random. I ran my fingers along it and felt a slight give, like a panel that didn't quite belong. My stomach dropped. I blinked. The hallway slammed back into place. This time, there was no doubt. I was looking down the motel corridor again, clearer than ever. The lights hummed softly overhead. The carpet looked worn, flattened by years of footsteps, and at the far end of the hall, directly opposite me, was a door. Room 8. My door. From the outside. I staggered back, heart hammering, then leaned forward again, drawn by a force I couldn't explain. The hallway didn't fade this time. It held steady, like it knew I was past pretending. Something moved near the far door. Slow footsteps echoed through the corridor, growing louder, closer. I could hear them now, not through the walls, not muffled, but clearly, like the sound was inside my head. Step, pause, step. A figure emerged from the shadows near the ceiling lights. Tall, too tall. Its outline distorted slightly, like I was seeing it through warped glass. It stopped in front of my door. My breath caught in my throat. From the hallway side, the figure raised its hand and reached for the handle of my door. At the same time, behind me in the room, I heard the soft click of metal. I spun around. The door to my room was still shut, the chair still wedged underneath the handle, but the lock was turning, slowly. I backed away, shaking, until my shoulders hit the wall beneath the window. When I turned back, the hallway figure was no longer at the door. It was right in front of the glass. So close, I could see the suggestion of a face features blurred, unfinished, like a reflection that hadn't decided what it was copying yet. Its mouth moved. No sound came from the room, but the words formed clearly in my mind. You keep opening it. My vision swam. Tears streamed down my face from the strain of holding my eyes open. I didn't open anything, I whispered. The thing tilted its head. The glass between us rippled slightly, like a disturbed surface of water. Every blink is a door, it said. Every door lets us through. Its hand pressed flat against the glass again. This time, the surface bowed inward. Not shattered, not cracked, bent. The seam around the frame widened, just a fraction. Enough to tell me the truth. This window wasn't meant to look out. It was meant to open in. Behind me, the lock finished turning. I felt it then, the certainty, heavy and absolute. If I closed my eyes now, even for a moment, I wouldn't be in the room when they opened again. I wouldn't be on this side of the glass. The figure smiled, and the smile was wrong too wide, stretching beyond where a mouth should end. Stay, it said again. You're already almost here. The lights cut out. Total darkness. I screamed, and finally, reflex took over. I blinked. The part 5. Roommate came with me. When my eyes opened, the lights were back on. I was on the floor, my cheek pressed into the carpet, my lungs burning like I'd been underwater too long. I sucked in air and scrambled backward, my hands slipping against the wall as I tried to put distance between myself and the window. The parking lot stared back at me. Normal. Still. Empty. For a second, just a second, I almost believed it was over. Then I noticed the silence. The neon sign wasn't buzzing anymore. No highway noise. No passing cars. No wind. I staggered to my feet and rushed to the door, yanking the chair aside. The lock turned easily this time, like it had never been touched. I threw the door open and stepped outside. The motel looked wrong. The building stretched farther than it had before, the row of rooms longer, repeating in a way that made my stomach twist. The paint color was different too, darker, more gray. The other car in the lot was gone. So was mine. I stood there, panicking, scanning the lot until I spotted it at the far end, parked beneath a light that flickered weakly. Relief hit me so hard my knees nearly gave out. I ran. As I passed the office, I glanced inside. It was empty. No woman behind the desk, no computer glow. Just a single key lying on the counter, catching the light. Roommate, clean, untouched, like it had never been used. I didn't stop. I reached my car, fumbled the keys, and threw myself inside, slamming the door and locking it twice without thinking. The engine roared to life on the first try, and I peeled out of the lot, tires squealing as I hit the road. The motel vanished in my rearview mirror faster than it should have. I didn't slow down for miles. Not until the sun began to rise did my hands finally stop shaking. I pulled into a rest stop just off the highway, parked beneath a tree, and sat there staring straight ahead, trying to convince myself I was safe, that it was over. I slept for maybe 20 minutes. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the light, too bright. I looked up. The rest stop bathroom window across the lot had no curtains. That was when I felt it in my pocket. Something hard. Plastic. I pulled it out slowly, my fingers already numb. A thin, cracked key tag. White numbers. 8. I stared at it for a long time, my reflection warped in the scratched surface. I don't remember putting it there. I don't remember taking it from the motel, but it was mine now. I left it on the concrete bench and drove away without looking back. That was months ago. I don't stay in roadside motels anymore. I don't sleep with windows uncovered. And I really try not to blink when I feel that familiar pressure in my chest, that sense that something is watching from just beyond the glass. Because sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in a room that feels a little too quiet, I'll look at the window and realize something is missing. No curtains, no blinds, no way to hide. And in the reflection, just for a heartbeat, I'll see a hallway stretching impossibly far behind me, and a door at the end of it. Room 8, still open. Story 2, the Part 1. Just needed ice. And I wasn't supposed to be there that late. I'd left El Paso earlier that afternoon, headed north for a short-term job assignment. Nothing dramatic. Just another contract, another stretch of highway, another night spent somewhere I wouldn't remember a week later. But the desert doesn't care about plans. By the time the sun went down, the heat still clung to the road like it didn't know when to let go. My car's AC started blowing warm air about an hour outside of town, and I knew I wasn't going to make it much farther without stopping. That's when I saw the motel. It sat just off the highway, low and wide, with a flickering sign that read, Sandstone Motor Lodge. The word vacancy glowed beneath it, buzzing softly in the dry night air. The parking lot was nearly empty. A pickup truck near the office. A dark SUV parked crooked by the far wall. Everything else was dark. I pulled in, shut off the engine, and sat there for a moment, listening to the ticking sound under the hood. The heat hadn't broken yet. Even with the windows cracked, the air felt thick and unmoving. I just needed a room, a shower, a few hours of sleep. The office door creaked as I stepped inside. Cool air washed over me, stale but welcome. Behind the counter sat an older man with thinning grey hair and heavy eyelids, watching a small TV mounted in the corner. The volume was low, almost muted, like it was there for company more than entertainment. "One night?" he asked, without looking away from the screen. "Yeah." He reached for a clipboard, slid it across the counter, and pointed to the line at the bottom. I filled it out while he rummaged for a key. "You're in room 2, he said, setting it down in front of me. A metal key on a red plastic tag, the number worn smooth from years of use. As I picked it up, he finally looked at me. "You gonna need ice?" he asked. "Probably," I said. "AC's shot." He nodded slowly, then added, almost as an afterthought, "Ice machine's acting up. Still works?" I asked. He hesitated, just for a second. Most of the time, he said. Just best not use it after midnight. I gave a tired half smile. I'll keep that in mind. He didn't smile back. Room 2 was near the middle of the building, a few doors down from the ice machine. I could hear it humming faintly as I walked past, a low, uneven vibration that didn't sound quite right, like it was struggling to breathe. The hallway lights cast long shadows along the concrete walkway. Bugs gathered around each fixture, clicking softly as they bounced against the glass. Inside the room, everything was standard. Beige walls, a bed with a stiff mattress, a small TV bolted to the dresser, the faint smell of cleaner layered over something older and harder to place. On the counter by the sink sat a plastic ice bucket. It was already there, lid on, empty. I touched it without thinking and pulled my hand back immediately. It was ice cold. I frowned and checked inside again. Nothing. No moisture, no cubes. Just cold plastic. Colder than the room had any right to be. I set it down and chalked it up to the heat messing with my senses. I kicked off my shoes, tossed my bag onto the bed, and stood in front of the AC unit, hoping it might suddenly decide to work. It didn't. The room felt warmer by the minute. Outside, somewhere down the hallway, the ice machine rattled loudly, then went quiet. I checked the time on my phone. 11:42 p.m. Plenty of time, I told myself. I grabbed the bucket and stepped back into the hallway, heading toward the hum at the far wall. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, not by a person, but by the building itself. Like the motel was paying attention now that I'd decided to stay. The ice machine came into view. Old, yellowed plastic. A small sign taped crookedly to the front that read, "Out of order." Sometimes. I laughed under my breath and lifted the lid. The machine made a sound I didn't expect. Not the sharp clatter of ice. Something heavier, something dull. And as the first pieces dropped into the bucket, a sudden chill crawled up my arms that had nothing to do with the air. Part 2. The ice wasn't just ice. And the machine finished its cycle with a low, choking grind. I stood there holding the bucket, staring down into it under the flickering hallway light. The ice inside didn't look right. Not at first glance anyway. The cubes were uneven, some larger, some smaller, like they'd been frozen without a mold. I scooped a few with my hand. They were painfully cold. Not just fresh ice cold, but the kind of cold that stings instantly, biting into your skin. I dropped them back into the bucket and shook my hand, frowning. "Cheap machine," I muttered. As I turned back toward my room, the hallway felt different, quieter. The hum of the ice machine had stopped completely, leaving behind a thick silence that pressed in on my ears. Back in room 2, I dumped the ice into the sink and filled the bucket with water to rinse off whatever residue might have been inside. The cubes clunked against the plastic, sinking slower than I expected. One of them didn't sink at all. It hovered just beneath the surface, cloudy and opaque, like something had been trapped inside during freezing. I leaned closer, squinting. There was a dark speck in the center. Not dirt, not air. Something solid. I told myself it was probably rust. Old pipes, bad filtration. I'd stayed in enough budget motels to know better than to expect clean ice. Still, unease crept in as I carried the bucket over to the small table by the bed. I poured a few cubes into a plastic cup and filled it with water from the tap. Minutes passed. The ice didn't melt, not even a little. I picked one up between my fingers. The surface was slick, but the edges were still sharp, unchanged. No condensation, no dripping, just solid, unmoving cold. That's when I noticed the smell. Faint, metallic, like old pennies or wet iron. I set the cube down and backed away from the table, my stomach tightening. "Okay," I said aloud, trying to steady myself. "That's enough." I dumped the rest of the ice into the sink and turned on the hot water, watching steam rise as it splashed over the cubes. They didn't react. The water ran around them, over them, but they stayed exactly the same. My chest tightened. I reached down and nudged one with my finger. It slid slightly, bumping into another cube with a dull click that echoed too loudly in the small bathroom. And then I saw it. Embedded just beneath the surface of one cube was something thin and dark. Straight. Too straight to be natural. I leaned closer, heart pounding. It was metal. A tiny loop, like part of a key ring, frozen perfectly in place. I yanked my hand back and stared at the sink, breath shallow and fast. The ice machine rattled again in the hallway. Once, then twice. As if responding. I checked my phone without thinking. 12:07 a.m. I remembered the clerk's voice. Best not use it after midnight. A nervous laugh escaped my throat. "You've got to be kidding me." I grabbed a towel, wrapped my hand around the cube with the metal inside, and lifted it out of the sink. It was heavier than it should have been. Carefully, I set it on the desk and waited. Seconds ticked by, then minutes. Slowly, impossibly slowly, the ice began to cloud, fractures spreading from the center outward. The metal piece shifted, sinking as the cube softened. And something else appeared with it. A scrap of paper, folded, soaked, trapped inside the ice. As the last of the cube melted away, the paper slipped free and unfolded on its own, sticking to the desk surface. Written in faded ink were three things: a name, a date, a room number. The date was from years ago. The room number wasn't mine. Not yet. From the hallway, the ice machine let out a long, grinding sound, deeper than before, like it was starting another cycle. I didn't move. I just stared at the paper, my pulse thundering in my ears, knowing with sudden certainty that the ice wasn't broken. It was working exactly the way it was supposed to. The part 3. Names in the ice. I didn't throw the paper away. I should have. Every rational part of me screamed to get rid of it, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. Instead, I folded it carefully and set it on the nightstand, like it might disappear if I treated it too roughly. I sat on the bed, staring at it, listening. The motel had gone unnaturally quiet. No TVs through the walls, no footsteps, no traffic from the highway. Just the low hum of electricity and, somewhere down the hall, the occasional creak of metal settling. Then the ice machine started again. This time, it didn't rattle once and stop. It ran continuously, grinding and churning like it was working overtime. I checked the time. 12:41 a.m. I stood there for a long moment, arguing with myself. Every instinct told me not to go back out there. But curiosity? No. Something heavier than curiosity pulled at me. A need to confirm what I already knew. I grabbed my shoes and stepped into the hallway. The light above the ice machine flickered erratically, bathing the wall in pulses of yellow and shadow. Melted ice pooled on the concrete beneath it, spreading into irregular shapes that looked disturbingly deliberate, like footprints half erased. Scattered among the puddles were objects. I crouched slowly, my heart pounding. A shirt button, cracked and yellowed. A short length of chain, rusted through the middle. And a key fragment, snapped cleanly in half. I didn't touch them. I stood up and lifted the lid of the ice machine again. Fresh ice spilled out. Too much of it. It overflowed the chute, clattering onto the floor and sliding across the wet concrete. The sound echoed down the empty hallway, impossibly loud. I filled the bucket with shaking hands and carried it back to room 2, careful not to let any of the cubes touch my skin. Inside, I dumped the ice into the sink and waited. It didn't take long. One cube clouded faster than the others, darkening at its center. Another had something pale suspended inside it, almost translucent. I watched, breath held, as the ice softened. A folded piece of paper slipped free and floated to the surface. Then another, and another. I laid them out on the counter as they emerged, my hands trembling. Each one had the same 3 things written on it: a name, a date, a room number. Different names, different years. But the room numbers were always the same few. Room 3, room 5, room 7. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I grabbed the first paper, the one from earlier, and lined it up with the others. Same handwriting, same faded ink. The last cube took longer to melt. I waited, staring at it, dreading what it might reveal. When it finally did, my breath caught in my throat. The paper inside was newer, cleaner. The ink was dark and unmistakable. It had today's date, and the name written there was mine. Below it, in the same careful lettering, was a room number. Room 2. I stumbled back from the sink, nearly slipping on the wet tile. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." The ice machine roared to life again, louder than before, the sound vibrating through the walls. Something slid under my door. I stared at it, frozen. Slowly, I bent down and picked it up. A metal key. My key. The red plastic tag was rimed with frost, the number barely visible beneath a thin layer of ice. From the hallway came the sound of footsteps, unhurried, purposeful. And in that moment, I understood the truth with sickening clarity. The ice machine wasn't broken. It was a record. And the motel didn't lose people. It kept them. Part 4. They don't leave the building. I didn't wait for the footsteps to reach my door. I shoved the papers into my jacket pocket, grabbed the frozen key, and slipped out into the hallway, pulling the door shut as quietly as I could behind me. The air felt colder now, thick with the smell of metal and stale water. The ice machine was still running. It shouldn't have been able to hold that much ice, but it kept grinding, spitting cubes onto the floor, each one landing with that same dull, heavy sound. The puddles beneath it had spread, creeping outward like something alive. I moved past it and toward the office. The lobby lights were on, but dimmer than before. The TV behind the counter showed nothing but static now, the image rolling slowly up the screen. The older man wasn't in his chair. "Hello," I called, my voice echoing too loudly. No answer. I stepped behind the counter, heart pounding, and noticed the wall I hadn't paid attention to earlier. It was covered with corkboard, old notices, faded flyers, newspaper clippings pinned in uneven rows, missing persons. Names and faces stared back at me under yellowed plastic sleeves. Men and women of all ages, a few teenagers. The dates stretched back decades. Every clipping mentioned the same thing. Last seen at the Sandstone Motor Lodge. And almost everyone had a handwritten note in the corner. Stayed near ice machine. My stomach dropped. You're not supposed to read those. The voice came from behind me. I spun around. The clerk stood in the doorway to the back hall, no longer slouched or half asleep. His posture was straight now, his expression flat and tired, like someone who'd been explaining the same thing for far too long. You know, he continued, most people don't even notice. They take the ice, use it, and by morning they're already settled. Settled? I demanded. What the hell does that mean? He sighed and rubbed his face with one hand. This place sits where the ground never cools right, he said. Old water table, old pipes, old habits. I shook my head. You're freezing people. You're killing them. No, he said quietly. We're keeping them. He stepped aside and gestured down the back hallway. Come see. I should have run. Every cell in my body screamed at me to bolt for the door. But something held me there. The same force that had drawn me back to the ice machine again and again. The hallway led to a maintenance room behind the ice machine. The door was open. Inside, the temperature dropped instantly. My breath fogged in front of me. Metal shelves lined the walls, stacked with plastic bins. Each bin was labeled with a room number. Inside them were things I recognized. Wallets, phones, watches, shoes, personal items, carefully cleaned and sorted. They don't rot, the clerk said from behind me. They don't age, not once the ice takes hold. I turned slowly. What happens to them? He met my eyes for the first time, and I saw something close to regret there. They cool down, he repeated. They stop wanting to leave, stop wanting anything. A loud crack echoed through the room. The ice machine. We both looked back toward the hallway. The sound of ice spilling onto the floor had changed. It was slower now, heavier, like something solid was forcing its way through the chute. The clerk swallowed. It's calling you, he said. Once it puts your name in the ice, it doesn't like being ignored. Get out of my way, I said, my voice shaking. He didn't move. You won't make it far, he said gently. They never do. The hallway lights flickered, plunging us into darkness for a split second. When they came back on, the clerk was gone, and the ice machine was silent. I stood there, alone, the cold pressing in from every direction, knowing with absolute certainty that whatever powered this place was done waiting. Part 5. Ice melts. It doesn't forget. I ran. I didn't grab my bag, didn't look back at the office. I just turned and sprinted down the hallway, my shoes splashing through icy water that hadn't been there before. The floor was slick, the concrete numbing my feet through the soles. Behind me, the ice machine roared back to life. Not grinding, not rattling, screaming. The sound followed me as the lights overhead began to shut off one by one, plunging sections of the hallway into darkness. Every time a light died, the air grew colder, sharper, biting into my lungs. I reached room 2 and yanked the door open. Inside, the room looked abandoned. The bed was stripped. The lamp was gone. Even the TV had been removed from the dresser, leaving behind a rectangle of cleaner wall. Like the room had already been cleared out. Like I had already checked out. The ice bucket sat in the middle of the floor. Full. I didn't touch it. I slammed the door shut behind me and shoved the dresser in front of it, heart pounding so hard I thought I might black out. The handle rattled once, twice, then stopped. Silence. I took that moment and bolted out the bathroom window, kicking the screen loose and dropping onto the gravel outside. Pain shot up my leg, but I stayed upright and ran. The parking lot was darker than before, the edges swallowed by night. My car sat where I'd left it, a thin layer of frost coating the windshield despite the desert heat. I fumbled the keys, hands slick with sweat, and threw myself into the driver's seat. As I slammed the door, something heavy thudded onto the roof of the car. I froze. Another thud. Then a slow sliding sound, like something being dragged across metal. I didn't look up. I started the engine and floored it. The tires spun, then caught, and I tore out of the lot, gravel spraying behind me. In the rearview mirror, I saw the motel lights flicker violently before going dark all at once. The road swallowed me. I didn't stop driving until the sun came up. When I finally pulled into a gas station miles away, my hands were locked around the steering wheel, knuckles white, jaw aching from how tightly I'd been clenching it. I sat there for a long time, breathing, telling myself I was safe, that it was over. When I reached for my jacket, something shifted on the passenger seat. A soft clink. I turned slowly. The ice bucket sat there, dry, intact, cold enough that frost spread across the fabric beneath it. Inside, nestled among the cubes, was a single piece of paper. I didn't need to open it to know what it said. I left the bucket on the pavement and drove away again, heart hammering, eyes locked forward. That was years ago. I don't use ice machines anymore. Not in motels. Not in hotels. Not anywhere that isn't my own home. But sometimes, late at night, when my freezer kicks on and the cubes shift inside their tray, I hear that same dull, heavy sound. And every now and then, when I open the door, one cube will be cloudy at the center, frozen around something thin and dark, waiting for a name. Story 3. Do not use the elevator after 1:11 a.m. The Part 1. One night, upper floor. I checked in later than I wanted to. The conference had run long, the drive took longer than expected, and by the time I pulled off the interstate, the digital clock on my dashboard read 12:06 a.m. My eyes felt dry and heavy, that familiar mix of exhaustion and alertness you get when you've been pushing yourself for too many hours. The hotel stood alone near the edge of town, an older concrete building with a narrow footprint and a vertical neon sign that buzzed softly in the night air. 3 stories tall. Not tall enough to feel modern, too tall to feel comfortable. I parked beneath a flickering light and grabbed my bag. Inside, the lobby was quiet and dim, lit mostly by a desk lamp behind the front counter. A middle-aged man with tired eyes sat there, typing slowly on a keyboard like he was in no rush to finish. A small TV mounted high on the wall showed a late-night news broadcast with the sound turned off. "One night?" he asked without looking up. "Just one," I said. He slid a clipboard toward me. I signed, handed over my card, and waited while he processed it. The machine beeped softly, then stopped. "You're on the second floor," he said, handing me a key card. "Room 214. "Elevator working?" I asked, nodding toward the narrow set of doors tucked into the corner of the lobby. He glanced at it, then back at me. "Yeah," he said, "most of the time." I smiled weakly. "Good enough?" As I turned to go, he cleared his throat. "If you head out again tonight," he said, choosing his words carefully, "use the stairs after 111. I paused. "After what?" "After 1:11 a.m. I frowned slightly. "Why?" He shrugged, but it felt practiced. "Elevators, inconsistent late at night." I waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. "Stairs are right there," he added, pointing to a dim hallway beside the elevator. "Bit of a walk, but safer." "Safer?" I echoed. He finally looked up at me then. Not alarmed, not afraid, just tired. "Just a suggestion," he said. I nodded slowly and headed toward the elevator. The doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a cramped interior that smelled faintly of metal and old cleaning solution. The walls were scratched stainless steel, dulled by decades of fingerprints. A small mirror hung above the control panel, its edges slightly warped. I glanced at the buttons. 1, 2, 4. There was no 3. Between the 2 and the 4 was a faint rectangular outline, like a button that had been removed and painted over. The metal there was smoother than the rest, worn down as if it had been pressed thousands of times. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The doors began to close. "Hey," I said, stepping forward and hitting 2. The button lit up, and the elevator started moving. It hummed softly as it ascended, slower than I expected. The numbers didn't display anywhere. There was no indicator, no digital readout, just the quiet mechanical sound of cables and pulleys somewhere above my head. I checked my phone. 12:11 a.m. The elevator slowed, then stopped. The doors opened. Second floor. A normal hallway stretched out in front of me. Patterned carpet, evenly spaced doors, warm yellow lighting. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and stepped out. As the doors slid shut behind me, I noticed something odd. The elevator didn't go back down. It just sat there, doors closed, light above them still on, like it was waiting for someone else. I turned away and walked toward my room, telling myself I was reading too much into things. I unlocked the door to 214, stepped inside, and dropped my bag on the bed. Just one night, I thought. Sleep, shower, out in the morning. But as I lay down, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the image of that missing button, the space where a number should have been, and the clerk's voice in my head, calm and flat. "After 1:11, take the stairs." Part 2. The floor that doesn't exist. I didn't plan on leaving my room again. I showered, changed, and lay back on the bed with the lights off, letting the steady hum of the building settle around me. The conference schedule for the next day glowed faintly on my phone screen, unread. My thoughts kept drifting back to the elevator panel, that empty space where a button should have been. Eventually, thirst won. The vending machines were in the lobby, and my room had no bottled water. I checked the time before I even stood up. 1:12 a.m. I hesitated. The clerk's words echoed in my head. "Use the stairs after 1:11. But the idea of hauling myself down 2 flights while half asleep felt ridiculous. I told myself the warning was probably about noise complaints or some old mechanical quirk they didn't want to deal with at night. I grabbed my key card and stepped into the hallway. It was quieter than before. The lights were dimmer too, like they'd been turned down to save power. As I walked toward the elevator, I noticed something that hadn't registered earlier. The stairwell door was propped open. Just a crack. Enough to let a thin strip of darkness spill out into the hall. I ignored it. The elevator doors were already open when I reached them. That stopped me short. I was sure I hadn't pressed the call button. The hallway was empty. No footsteps, no voices. Just the open doors, waiting. After a brief, uncomfortable pause, I stepped inside and pressed 2. The doors slid shut. The elevator started moving. Down. At least, that's what it should have done. Instead, it moved up. The hum deepened, stretching into a low, strained sound that vibrated through the floor beneath my feet. The ride felt longer than it had before, too long for a single floor. I glanced at my phone again. No signal. The elevator slowed, stopped. The doors opened. I didn't step out. The hallway beyond was wrong. The carpet was grey instead of patterned, its fibres flattened, as if no one had walked on it in years. The ceiling was lower, close enough that I felt like I could reach up and touch it. There were no windows, no exit signs, just a long, straight corridor disappearing into shadow. The lights buzzed faintly overhead, flickering out of sync with one another. I stood perfectly still, heart thudding in my ears. This wasn't the second floor. I leaned forward slightly, staying inside the elevator, and scanned the walls for room numbers. There were none. Just doors. Every one of them shut. The air drifting in felt stale and cold, carrying a faint metallic smell I couldn't place. Somewhere down the corridor, I heard a sound. A soft scuff, like a shoe dragging lightly across carpet. I took a step back. The elevator doors began to close on their own. As they slid together, I caught a glimpse of movement near the far end of the hall. Something tall, shifting just out of the light. The doors shut completely. The elevator lurched. A moment later, it was moving again, this time downward. My breath came out in a shaky rush. I braced myself against the wall, palms slick with sweat, as the familiar hum returned. Seconds later, the doors opened to the normal second-floor hallway. Warm light, patterned carpet, exit sign glowing softly at the far end. I didn't move right away. Only when the doors began to close again did I step out, turning quickly to look back. The elevator interior looked the same as always. No sign of the grey hallway, no dust, no smell. But as the doors slid shut, I noticed something on the floor just inside. A set of footprints, dry, powdery, leading out of the elevator and stopping exactly where I stood. I didn't go back to the vending machines. I walked straight to my room, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bed with my shoes still on, heart racing. Whatever that was, I knew one thing for certain now. The clerk hadn't been warning me about a broken elevator. He'd been warning me about where it goes. Part 3. It only happens at that time. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that hallway again. The low ceiling, the grey carpet, the way the light seemed to die the farther it went. I lay there listening to the building, counting the seconds between the soft mechanical sighs of the elevator as it moved somewhere below me. At 2:03 a.m., it stopped. I sat up, heart pounding. The elevator dinged. Not loudly, just once. Muted, like it was trying not to be heard. I waited for footsteps in the hallway. None came. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me under. When I woke again, pale morning light filtered through the thin curtains, and the normal sounds of a hotel returned. Doors opening, muffled voices, water running through pipes. In daylight, everything felt stupid. I checked out the elevator on my way to grab coffee. The doors opened normally. The panel looked exactly the same. 1, 2, 4, and that smooth blank space in between. I pressed 2. The ride was short, normal, no hesitation, no strange hum. I rode it again, and again. Nothing happened. I told myself the night before had been a stress dream layered over exhaustion, my mind filling in gaps where logic failed. By noon, I almost believed it. That night, I stayed out late on purpose. I had dinner, walked around the area, killed time until my phone ticked over to 1:11 a.m. I stood across the street from the hotel, staring up at its dark windows, feeling ridiculous for hesitating. At 1:14, I went back inside. The lobby was empty. The clerk wasn't at the desk. The elevator doors were closed. I pressed the call button. Nothing happened. I pressed it again. Still nothing. Then, without a sound, the doors slid open. I stepped inside and pressed 2. The doors closed. The elevator didn't move. For several long seconds, nothing happened at all. Then the lights inside dimmed slightly, and the hum began. Slower this time. Deeper. The panel flickered. The 2 went dark. In its place, a faint white glow appeared in the blank space where the missing button should have been. Not a number, just a small horizontal line, like a dash. The elevator began to move. Up. My throat tightened. I took a step back, pressing myself into the corner as the hum stretched into a strained groan. The ride lasted far too long for a single floor. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. The grey hallway waited beyond them. This time, the lights were on. I stayed inside the elevator, every muscle locked, and scanned the corridor more carefully. The doors lining the hall were identical, unmarked, unnumbered, their handles dulled with age. At the far end, something new caught my eye. A wall-mounted sign. It was small, rectangular, bolted crookedly to the wall. The paint was chipped, the lettering almost worn away. I leaned forward, squinting. If the doors open and you don't recognize the floor, stay inside. My stomach dropped. The sign hadn't been placed there by accident. It hadn't been written for me. It had been written because of people like me. A sound drifted down the hallway. Soft, rhythmic. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, growing closer. I slammed my hand against the elevator's door close button. Nothing happened. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath. Then I heard it. A faint metallic jingle. Keys brushing against each other. Close now. Too close. The elevator doors began to slide shut on their own. As the gap narrowed, I caught sight of a shape moving just beyond the threshold. Tall, blurred, its outline indistinct, like something seen through fogged glass. The doors sealed. The elevator dropped suddenly, jolting me off balance, and then continued downward at normal speed. When it stopped again, The doors opened to the second floor. Normal hallway. Warm light. I stumbled out, shaking. The elevator doors closed behind me, and for a brief moment, the panel lit up. Not with floor numbers, with text. Room 214. My room. The light blinked once and went dark. I backed away slowly, heart racing, a single thought echoing in my head. The elevator wasn't malfunctioning. It was learning. Depart 4. That floor is still occupied. I didn't go back to my room. I stood there in the hallway for a long time after the elevator doors closed, staring at the metal like it might open again on its own. My reflection in the brushed steel looked wrong, stretched slightly, like the surface couldn't decide how to copy me. When my legs finally unlocked, I walked toward the lobby. The front desk light was on again. The clerk stood behind it, hands folded neatly on the counter like he'd been waiting. The TV behind him still played the news on mute, the anchor's mouth moving silently. "You used it," he said. It wasn't a question. "I pressed 2, I replied. My voice sounded thin in the open space. "It didn't take me to 2. He nodded once, slowly. "After 111, it doesn't always." "What floor was that?" I asked. "Where did it try to take me?" For a moment, he said nothing. Then he stepped out from behind the desk and walked toward the elevator, motioning for me to follow. "You notice there's no third floor button," he said as we walked. "Most people do. They assume it's a renovation thing. Fire code, weight limits." He stopped a few feet from the elevator doors. "This building used to be 4 stories," he continued. "The third floor was sealed off 20 years ago." "Why?" "Because people stopped coming back." My stomach tightened. He reached into a drawer behind the desk and pulled out a thin binder, its cover warped from age. Inside were photocopied reports, maintenance logs, incident summaries. He flipped to a page near the middle and held it up so I could read. Guest misplacement, elevator incident, dates, names, room numbers. Some of them were circled in red. "They'd get on late," he said quietly. "After conferences, after weddings, after long drives. Always tired, always distracted." He turned another page. Elevator would open on the 3rd floor. They'd step out thinking it was theirs. Doors would close behind them. "And then what?" I asked. He met my eyes. "Then they'd belong to it." A low ding echoed through the lobby. The elevator. The doors slid open a few feet away from us. Inside, the light was on. Empty. Waiting. "The floor is still there," the clerk said. "They never demolished it. Just sealed the stairwells, covered the button, painted over the numbers. But you still hear them," he went on. "Late at night. Keys, footsteps, people trying doors that don't open anymore." I swallowed hard. "Why not shut the elevator down?" He gave a tired smile. "Because it keeps them contained." The elevator let out a soft chime again, impatient. "And because," he added, "it doesn't like being ignored." The panel inside flickered. For a split second, the blank space between 2 and 4 lit up brighter than before. A number appeared. 3. The clerk stepped back. "If you're going to leave," he said calmly, "take the stairs. Right now." The elevator doors opened wider, and from somewhere deep inside the shaft, I heard the unmistakable sound of keys jingling. Right behind me. Part 5. It still stops for me. I didn't argue. The moment the clerk said stairs, I turned and ran. The stairwell door slammed open under my hand, and I took the steps two at a time, my bag thumping against my side, breath tearing in and out of my chest. The concrete walls closed in as I descended, the sound of my footsteps echoing far too loudly in the narrow shaft. Somewhere above me, the elevator chimed again. Once, then twice. I didn't look back. I burst out into the lobby, shoved through the front doors, and didn't stop moving until I was in my car, with the engine running and the headlights cutting through the darkness. I pulled out of the lot so fast my tires squealed, the hotel shrinking behind me in the rearview mirror. I didn't slow down until the city lights disappeared and the highway stretched empty in front of me. I drove until dawn. When I finally stopped at a rest area, my hands were still shaking. I sat there with the engine off, listening to it tick as it cooled, trying to convince myself that I'd overreacted. That exhaustion and nerves had turned a faulty elevator into something else in my head. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages, just the time, 1:11 a.m. My stomach dropped. I blinked hard, refreshed the screen. 6:42 a.m. I laughed shakily and stepped out of the car, stretching stiff muscles, breathing in the cool morning air. The rest stop was quiet, peaceful. Inside the building, I headed for the vending machines. An elevator stood at the far end of the hall. I hadn't noticed it on the way in. The doors were open. The interior looked newer than the one at the hotel. Brighter lights, clean walls, a digital panel above the buttons. I stopped walking. The panel flickered. The numbers scrolled briefly, then stopped. 214. My room number. The elevator let out a soft chime, inviting. I took a step back. The doors began to close. Just before they met, I saw it. The grey hallway, low ceiling, unmarked doors, and at the far end, someone standing perfectly still, keys dangling loosely from one hand. The doors shut. I didn't wait for them to open again. I left the rest stop without buying anything and drove the rest of the way home using back roads, avoiding every building with more than one floor. Even now, years later, I still take the stairs whenever I can. Because sometimes, late at night, when I'm standing in an elevator that should be empty, I hear it. A faint metallic jingle, right behind me. And when the doors open, I don't always recognize the floor.